Hello, and welcome to Have Your Say. I'm Ann Minicozzi, president of the Community Breakfast Collaborative, here with our co-host, Diana Robertson, who is the second vice president of the NAACP of Pennsylvania, and we're all both of us involved with the Community Breakfast Collaborative. Diana's a board member of that organization as well. And just want to say we hadn't been recording our show for quite a while. We want to dedicate this show today in memory of Vince Celli, and I'm just going to show you this plaque that we have recently had in the studio and dedicated the studio, Vince Celli Studio, in memory of Vince Celli, who was our general manager, who passed away in May, just after we recorded our last program. So we're going to have this show in honor of Vince, and wanted to let you know that. So we have been away for a little while. But we're starting up again, and really our show today will be focused on wrapping up 2021 and what events and topics are important to talk about, and then what we'll probably do is focus on some of those topics in 2022. Right. So I'll turn it over to you, Diana.
Right. So yes, we know that 2021 there was a lot going on as usual, and as I started to think about some of the issues, some of the even topics that we had conversations on, things such as poverty, food insecurity. I'm going to name a few, then we can go back and hone in on certain ones. Food insecurity, homelessness, unemployment, racial tensions, education, the health disparities obviously is big, it's still a big issue. Prison, and voting rights. So those were clearly issues, topics that have been important in the past, but were heightened, I think, in 2021 as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so as we start to think about some of the things, I guess starting with health, making sense is that, with the COVID-19, the different variants, that have taken place. Clearly, 2020 was just a shutdown of everything, which really impacted people's lives drastically. And in 2021, we're in December, and we still, COVID is still a huge topic. It's a huge issue because there's still people who are impacted by COVID. They've, contracted the disease, many. There have been people who've died from the disease. There's still hospitalizations. And the one difference, though, is that the vaccine, the creation of the vaccine, and trying to really get a hold of this by people getting immunized with the vaccine.
Yeah.
And so we had the initial vaccine, and now it has developed so that children ages 5 to 11 can now get the vaccine as well. And hopefully, that all of this will begin to make a difference, and I think it has. But the problem is that there's still a lot of people who are not vaccinated. And right now there's, as of the past week or so, another new variant. And I guess
the Omicron.
Yes, and what people don't realize, one of the things that I hear from, health officials is that, viruses allowed to, pass from one person to another. That's what they do. They mutate, and so that's why it's so important. And I don't think some people don't understand that, the longer it's out, it doesn't take on the same form, because when you're trying to get that, it's like killing one thing and it's kind of like, no, I'm just going to fight back.
Yeah.
And it develops into something else that then you have to go back, okay, and there's a lot of learning to do as to how this will impact us. So.
Yeah. And just to back up a little bit, and then just talking in the context of our show,
Mm-hmm.
we were in 2020, we were recording Have Your Say by Zoom.
Yes.
So we were doing that, and there were no vaccines at that point. So
Right.
everyone was really quarantined, and we had to really change how things were happening here at the TV studio.
Correct.
And we had our first show in May of 2021, really a few months ago, 6 months ago.
Right.
Right after we were both vaccinated,
Yes.
so that we were able to come to the studio in person. So
Right.
this impact of the coronavirus on all of us and all of our ways of life and activities is really significant. And we can
Yes.
see that, in just in the context of our recording this program.
Absolutely.
But the other thing that I think, a couple things that I think stays with us in terms of the having this pandemic is, even though children who are 5 years old can be vaccinated, the children younger than that cannot be.
Right.
So we still have that. We have a newborn in my extended family.
Okay.
My nephew and his wife have had their second child now, just born a couple weeks ago.
Oh.
And so for the next 5 years, at least as far as we know for now,
Right.
he can't be vaccinated.
Right.
And so that impacts what they're going to be able to do as a family, how we can get together as an extended family.
Right.
So there's that population that continues not to be able to be vaccinated, setting aside people who are perfectly able to get vaccinated
But
and are eligible and won't,
Mm-hmm.
even though this is a global pandemic.
Right.
So there's that population, and so still that concern: how do we manage ourselves and our society through this pandemic still, in terms of infants to age 5? That's a big
Right.
impact. And then the second thing is sort of our tendency as a society, and even as our corporate culture, to act like everything's fine and we can keep doing all the things, and we can
Right.
keep doing all of our shopping.
Right.
If they can get
Right.
the merchandise to shore,
Right.
and we can go buy it with the supply chain situation as it is now,
Yeah.
that we should still go ahead and do all of those things. And it's not normal times, but the strain of acting as though it were normal times
Right.
is another thing that's really, I think it really wears on people, and I don't think we talk about that.
Well, and I think what people have to realize is that they're hoping, it's the hope that things will return to what we knew as normal. And from my perspective, it will never be, again, what we knew as normal. There is a new normal. And so I think until we realize that, that there's just going to be a new normal. Now, to what extent, as time goes on, it will have to be, constantly being conscious of so many things. But I think it's going to be a little while. I can remember when things first were shut down, my thought was like, a couple of weeks, a month. And then time kept going on and on. I'm thinking like, oh, this is serious, And I think from that point on, it was just understanding the severity of what was taking place and what we had not experienced before, in our times anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand, and I've just come up with, there's just a new normal.
Yeah.
There's a new normal, like even with my own grands, they're constantly washing their hands. They don't have any problems with, their masks when they're out and doing certain things, and they're just like watching people conscious. They're like conscious of their surroundings, and they're, so they've actually, I think, and maybe because they are younger, they've adapted to, okay, this is just what we have to do. And so now it's like they don't do anything without washing their hands or making sure they always have their little sanitizers around. And so, for them, I think it is becoming a norm. And I think for us, we just have to understand there really is a new norm. And until we're able to just deal with that fact, then that's what makes it so difficult for others.
Yeah, I think if we can let go of the idea that we're going to go back to some normal from the past, if we can let go of that
Right.
and recognize that we're in a new normal, then we have other things that we need to do. Like I think about people's resiliency how can I be resilient? Now we have the Omicron virus. So
Right.
take a deep breath. Now, what do I need to do to adapt? Like you're talking about your grandchildren. What changes do I need to make? What do I need to continue to do the same way
Right.
for a little bit longer?
Mm-hmm.
And think about how do we maintain some kind of resiliency, which is extremely difficult. You cannot
Right.
minimize this. This is extremely
Oh, no, you
difficult
can't.
to try to be resilient. And let me ask you, like one thing that I think of is when my grandparents and then my parents as children were going through the Depression in the United States. What was that like for them? They had to have so many things change in their life.
Right.
The way that they bought food, trying to, supplies were scarce. Everything was scarce.
Yes.
And how did they have to adapt? Their lives had to completely change for a long time.
Right.
And comparing that to, I have to get vaccinated and wear a mask, and not to minimize what I need to do, but there's a difference.
Right.
Family members who have gone through World War II and things like that. So family members have had to be away in the military, and that kind of impact, trying to have a victory garden at home, things like that.
Yeah.
What kinds of things have people done in the past that we could maybe think of by comparison to help us be more resilient? Do you have any things that you can that you think of?
I think one of the things is the mindset of that everything that I do is not just for me. So I think the mindset of looking at, there are going to be some things that I do that clearly, yes, will help protect me, but it will help protect others as well. And I think that's a thought process that I think in this time is not always how people think. It's just the inconvenience to them. Well,
yeah.
What about the inconvenience to others who actually get sick because of someone who's not impacted by it but is carrying something, and they're exposed to that. And so I think we're in a day and a time that everything's about us personally, whereas we're not looking at how is what I do impacting someone else, and starting with even people who are close to you. So if you start with, as you say, well, how's that going to impact my loved ones? How's it going to impact, what happens when, like the people who were in the nursing homes and people could not go see their family members, and that was difficult. And it was difficult for both. It was difficult for the family member who couldn't see their loved one, and the ones that were sick, the ones in the hospital who could not physically see their loved ones, And so when you look at it from that perspective, I think that might say, well, okay, I'm going through this, but what are they going through? Or what could they go through, because I'm negligent in doing certain things.
Yeah, and the isolation, I think, that everybody experienced through the quarantine time before vaccines were available.
Right.
I think that should have been, I think for a lot of people, it really was a wake-up call that we, as humans, need to be in connection with each other and be in community with each other to a surprising extent.
Yeah,
I think that was really a wake-up call, that when you had the chance to talk with someone who, just another person,
right?
Because you were just having to, stay isolated,
mentally. And I think even now we're talking about the mental health problems that have been one of the outcomes of the isolation, or of the pain of loss, or of not being able to work, and of the the struggles of feeding your family, and the homelessness for some, and all of those things. So it's even recently, thinking about doctors are telling folks, you can now make it your appointments to come in, because during that time, a lot of people weren't coming in for their regular
Yeah.
exams. They weren't, and they might have had some health issues, but because they weren't going to the doctors, and maybe they couldn't get prescriptions renewed, because some things require an exam in order to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's just been upsetting on all levels, and then understanding that to not acknowledge it is not the way we can go either. We can't act like it doesn't exist. We can't act like that we have to. But and looking at those of us who have not been impacted with severity, that's a blessing. That's a blessing. And so therefore, how do we help others to get through as well? So, yeah.
We were talking about being quarantined in our homes, and you just touched on families who had become homeless during the quarantine and through the whole pandemic. And we had various eviction moratoriums at the federal level and then at the state level in Pennsylvania.
Right.
But the application of those has been really challenging. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and in eviction, I was just talking to someone recently in regard to that I don't think people even realize that there is help, that they're, like the county, like especially Montgomery County, still has money that, it does require completing an application, but they do have money to actually help folks from being evicted. The issues not being able to pay your rent, and now that the moratorium is basically off, that we're going to be going through the winter, that people are anticipating that number is going to increase drastically, because now the landlords are in a position to say, like, we need our money too, So it's like, okay, we understand people are struggling, but so are we, And so what will that mean? So if they're starting to file these notices, in court, then, people are going to have to go. But what we're saying is that there actually is money available if you fill out the applications. And so I do want people to know that in the different counties, there is actually still money available. And if you're struggling with not having been able to pay your rent, or you're about to reach that point that you can't, then please go to your county office or look it up on the website if you can, if you have access to the internet. Then look it up and under your particular county, and look at information that you can fill out in order to be considered to, get a certain amount of money that at least will buy you some time while you're trying to either, get a job or just catch up from not being able to pay your rent.
Yeah, and it sounds like the counties are getting much better at homelessness prevention. So being able to get a little bit of money. I know home heating oil, the prices are really high right now.
Right.
So if, if that is what's causing you to have a tight budget, if you're able to get some, it doesn't have to be a lot of funding, $500 or something like that, so you could have some funds to help you pay your rent.
Right.
Because the heating is expensive.
Right.
That could be another reason, like to get in touch earlier before you actually become homeless.
Right. And I think even for the gas, there are plans through the actual companies that you can contact them, and with doing that, at least get some relief, some temporary relief while you're trying to figure out the rest. So, but I think it's sad when people don't know about any funding or any possible help that they actually could get, and so that's important for people, even if you personally don't need it, and you know of others who might, or just don't even know if people need it or not, but pass that information along
Yeah.
to folks so that they will get to know that if you're in that situation, look, you have to do what you need to do to keep yourselves going. Then take advantage of the money that the counties have.
Yeah.
So.
And even if you're not sure how to reach the county in particular, you could always go through your local representatives, your state
Yes.
representative, your state senator, and they'll
Right.
definitely get you connected.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So all of that, I know we spend a lot of time on the health, but that's a big deal, and it impacts all the other things that we've been talking
It
about.
really does. It's
Yes.
kind of the overarching
Yes.
impact issue of everything else that we need to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's, because of this pandemic, like I said, these things were existed before, but certainly it just was exacerbated with understanding how huge it is. I listened to right before Thanksgiving, the food banks like Phil Abundance and some of these other huge, food banks talked about how much food they had been given away. It's like triple from just a year before.
Yeah.
And so it just tells you of the needs of people for food. Like I said, we talked about, the homelessness situation, unemployment, and now that there are jobs, I know people, we've been talking about jobs, minimum wage jobs that are not livable, income. But right now, since the pandemic, there actually are jobs out there that are, a lot of them I've seen, at least are $15 an hour. So what I would suggest is, even if it's not perfectly what you want for the moment, but income is income until you can get on your feet.
Yeah.
And so there's not too many places I've been, and especially now before Christmas, that everybody's hiring.
Yeah.
There's signs everywhere I go that says hiring, and the hourly rate for many places is $15 an hour. So what I'm saying is that there are things, and especially for the younger adults, there are jobs out there that you could take advantage of, and at least to help get you back on your feet.
Yeah. I think the other thing, in addition to the housing being expensive and challenging to maintain your housing during the pandemic, the other thing is childcare.
Yes.
If you don't have childcare for your children and you need that, you can't really go to work very easily. But then with schools having to be closed because we didn't have vaccines,
right,
and trying to learn online, which is just really challenging for
many
younger and younger people. Not to mention teaching on
Zoom,
remote on Zoom like that is very challenging.
Right.
That's another thing that's really impinging people being able to work jobs so that they can help to support themselves.
That has made a big difference. And so I know there's the child tax credit for things that people just have to really, once again, it's an information piece.
Yeah.
And so possibly as we even do programs next year, we can provide information on these different topics where people can actually listen, so they don't if they don't have time to go and find it, then at least they can listen to and get the information by listening to the program that way. And so as of course our time is starting to wind up, but the one thing I do want to end up on, or the two things, is the issue of education. We talked about that, and certainly how that's been clearly impacted on different levels, and just all of the racial tensions, that's been huge, and has been shown in all of these areas as well. Just how much of there've been a lot of conversations, However, things have to move beyond the conversations
Yeah.
and their real actions of acknowledgement, and then moving past that in the different categories, in the different areas, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's in the criminal justice area, voting rights, all of these things impact us as individuals, impact us as families, impact us as communities. And so race very often is an underlying piece linked to all of these things. And so we cannot ignore it. We cannot, continue to let the systemic issues impact the outcomes. We've got to start to deal with them.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's some of our conversations next year that we'll delve even more on the specific topics.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think we have a couple of minutes left. I don't know if you wanted to give any concluding remarks, and then I'll just finish off in our short time.
Clearly, we have a lot to talk about in 2022, and I think you're right. If we are using, we have done this in the past, using this program as a vehicle to get information out to people.
Yes.
And the other thing I think we really want to say is if anybody has ideas on who we could invite to the program, who they want to hear from, they can let us know that.
Right, absolutely. And so I look forward to next year getting back to our regular
Yes.
our regular program on specific topics of interest, things that are in the news, things for information, providing information, and really being able to help people by using this platform as a method of mechanism to providing information. And so as we conclude this year and look forward to next year, I'll say happy holidays to everyone, and that if you have a problem or there's information that you want to find out, you can feel free to contact us as well. And but go to your county, go to your representative, and you should be able to get a lot of information. So we look forward to those of you joining us in a program that you also are able to have your say. Thank you.